Hello and welcome to this video, which will talk about how to make Pong in Pygame. Now this tutorial here is going to be relatively simple. We're just going to use many of the ideas that you already know about functions. You could create it using classes, but for our purposes here, we'll use it just with regular functions. So let's open up a new replet here and make sure that you're in the Pygame. And at the start here, we're going to, import Pygame. And let me just zoom in a little bit here in a second. So typical, right? Bring in our package, and the only package we need to bring in is Pygame. The other thing that we're going to do is create a bunch of variables here. And so the first thing that we're going to do is create three colors. And I'm putting these as capitals. And that's because these values will never change. So even though they're a variable, black is always going to be 0, 0, 0. And if you know from creating colors with light, RGB, red, green, blue, and black is basically the absence of any red, green, or blue. So the 0 value is there. Now, if we take a look at red, given that 255, so this is 8-bit color, 255 is the maximum. So we have maximum red, no green, no blue. Okay, and then if we wanted to do green, yep, you guessed it, 0, 255, and another 0. Okay, and obviously you could create any color you want. I think 16 million colors if you needed to. And so, yeah, we just created three colors so we can reference them quickly rather than having to type in those, what they're called a tuple, right? Sort of three color values for red, green, and blue respectively. All right, we will create a couple more variables here. And I'm going to call this player1 x value. And I'm going to set that to 0. Well, actually, I'll set it to 10. And then we'll talk about that in a second. And player1y, and we'll set that to 250. Don't worry about these numbers. They'll make more sense when we create the game. But this is basically the position on the x-axis and position on the y-axis for player 1. We need to do the same thing for player 2. I'm going to copy that, I think. Save me a little bit of typing. And player 2 on the x and player 2 on the y. And we'll change these values a little bit. So we'll do 490 on the x, and we'll leave that at 250 on the y. Now, the ball as well. So let's say the ball on its x value, and we'll set that to 250. And the ball on the y, we'll also set that to 250. So that's basically going to be in the center of our screen. Now we're going to create two more variables here, and they are, I'm trying to reduce the length of these names here, but what did I call it? Direction of the ball horizontal. So direction of the ball horizontal, and we're actually going to use a string. And we'll say left at the start. It will change to right at some point. And then direction of the ball vertical, we'll start that down. And the opposite, obviously, up. And you'll see how we sort of can alternate between those as it transforms either from left to right, okay, or from top to bottom, sort of as it bounces up and down. So those there, we've got one more set of variables. Score, player1, and we'll set that to 0, and score player2, and we'll set that to 0 as well. So we've got a set of, well, a bunch of variables here, right, that are going to be important as our game progresses. Basically, we're going to have, the position of player 1's paddle, position of player 2's paddle, position of the ball, the direction the ball is heading, and then the score. So once we've got those down, what we'll do is set up some of the gameplay items. So these are particular to Pygame, a lot of this here. And so what I'm going to do is to create a clock is we go pygame.time.clock. And this creates the game clock. And this is going to be important for setting the pace of the game. And we'll see that in a minute or two here. We're also going to create a screen, and we can basically create the dimensions here. So pygame.display.set mode. And what we're going to do is create a tuple, again, 500, 500. And here, makes sense as well, that is the width and the height of it. The last thing that we'll do for the display kind of thing is, so pygame.display. This is just going to set it up right at the start so that we've got something in here. Set caption. So the caption is going to be sort of in the heading of the game. And again, you'll see this in a couple minutes. So let's put a few things in here. Let's say the name, whoops, sorry, I should put that as a string. Let's put the name of the game, which is Pong. And then we can't do F strings here, so we have to do a little bit of concatenation. So apologize for this is a little bit complicated here, but we're going to put Pong. And then I've put a plus here. Now, I probably didn't need to put a plus there, but we'll concatenate this. Score, player 1, and then colon and a space. And then I'm going to plus, and then we're going to set to a string the player 1 score. Player 1, sorry. Score player 1. And then we've got that. Plus, and then we're going to start another one here. And put a dash, score, player 2, colon, space, and then another plus, and then a string to score player 1. And I'm going to explain this a little, or score player 2, sorry. I'm going to explain this a little bit more once we sort of see things on the board here. So we're almost done in terms of setting things up. We have to initialize Pygame, so .init. This actually gets Pygame to sort of run here. Now, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we're going to put in the middle here, a bunch of different functions, but just to make sure that sort of everything's working here and that we can sort of play test it as we build it, let's put in the game loop as well. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space just so that I can recognize that I got to put some stuff in there, quite a bit of stuff. And we're going to create a game loop. And so we're going to set a variable here to be 1. Okay, now this is just one way to say that the game is actually running. And I'm going to put while loop. And basically we're saying while loop is true. So while, and loop being 1 is considered a truth value, a truthy value. So loop will run here by default. And so we're going to define a couple things. Keys, pygame.key.get pressed. Okay, and so that will just allow us to access the keys a little bit later for event in pygame.event.get. And so just we'll get into this in a second. If event.type is equal to pygame.quit, this has to be a capitalization here. Okay, then we're going to set the loop to 0. What this will do, if event, just a second, if event.type pygame.quit, that's looking okay. .get, what's the problem here? Undefined event. If for each, even I've got there. Event, there we go. So for each event in pygame.event.get, we'll put a print statement in here in a little bit. In fact, we'll put it in here right now. You'll sort of see what's going on. Okay, so just hold your worries here for a minute because we're almost done in terms of getting the basic game loop in here. So what we'll do is make sure you come back all the way to there, and I'll leave a little bit of a space there. Let's just see what this is working. So pygame.display .update. So this will update the display, okay, because we got to refresh it every frame. Screen.fill, and we'll fill it with black. Whoops, gotta make sure that's all capitalized. And clock.tick, and we'll set that to 30 for the moment. And I think we're pretty well done here. The only thing is if we jump out of the loop, so if this is no longer true, we'll do PyGame.quit. Okay, so I know that was lots of typing. What we'll do is we'll take a little look here. We'll hit play, and I'll explain some of the stuff going on. So I'm going to hit run. Now this might take a second here. All right, so it finally finished there compiling. And so what we've got here, and don't worry about this, I'll explain that in a second. So we've got Pong, score, player 1, 0, score, player 2, 0. Okay, so that's sort of the score. I probably don't need to have score again, but anyways, we'll fix that up in a second. What you'll notice is at the bottom, there are some things moving around. And you can kind of see here, there's a number, 180, 196, or 184, 202. That's where my mouse is. This screen, and it's a little hard to see, I'll try to make this a little bit bigger. It's 500 by 500, and I need, let me zoom out a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, the top left is basically 0, 0. Okay, as you can see, 1, 3, 2, but if I get it right there, there's 0, 0. And so, like I said, the screen is actually 500 by 500, so it's square. And if I come down diagonal, you can see both numbers getting larger, and then we've got 500, 500 here. So the bottom right is 500, 500. Left, obviously, on the x-axis, those are lower numbers, and as you move to the right, the x-axis value increases to basically 500. And same thing vertically, if you've at the top it's 0, and it increases to 500 on the y-axis until it increases to 500 until you get to 500 here at the bottom. Okay? If I go out, it does something, it says leave window and stuff. And these are all the events. I think if I click, yeah, it says mouse button up, and it told me stuff. Right mouse button, it would say something, right? So these are all events that basically the game can keep track of. If I come over here, this is going to be the quit button, and there it is, quit, and therefore it closed. So everything is gone. Okay? So that makes a bit more sense with these numbers, right? So player paddle X, or sorry, player 1 paddle on the x-axis is going to be over to the left, so the x value is quite low, and then about the middle, 250 here. Same thing with the player 2 is going to be 490, which is on the opposite side on the x-axis, right? So on the opposite side of the screen, and 250 there, so about halfway down. We'll talk about that in a minute. Maybe 225 would be a better number there, and I'll explain that when we get to it. But maybe I'll change that to 255 or 225. Sorry. Yeah. Now the last little bit. Right, there was the screen size that we just talked about, and I just wanted to improve this score. We don't need to put score here again. We'll just put player 2. So this is the score. Maybe I'll just make that all capitalized too. Give a little bit more space, just to clean it up a little bit. Okay, and you can see what happened there was when I clicked the end game, right? It set the loop to 0. The loop 0 is a falsy value. And so what ends up happening is when it went to double check, is loop true? It was no longer true. So it jumped out of this. It was no longer in the game loop, and it was allowed me to do the PyGame.quit. All right, we'll stop this video here. And in the next video, we'll start to draw some of the stuff on the screen, such as the paddles and maybe the ball. So we'll see how that goes.